Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Sports Fix podcast. I'm your host, Travis Hughes, here by myself today. Tyler's not able to be here this week, but hopefully we'll have him on for some more episodes. So for those who are looking to have him, I look forward to hearing from him. Sorry to disappoint you. I hope I can fill in those shoes, but. So let's get into this. So the NFL season's over. We kind of talked about that last week. But we're not done talking about football. Something really interesting that has come up is the Alliance of American Football, I believe is the abbreviation, the AAF. This is they go by the Alliance of American Football, and they just started their season this past weekend. For those of you who don't know, basically this is a tier below the NFL. This is a lot of players who either have had a shot in the NFL and haven't really gone anywhere, or these are players that never got a chance in the NFL, and now they're able to play in this league. It's not a minor league per se of the NFL, but it's kind of a step down as far as level of talent. However, it was pretty entertaining to watch this past week. It wouldn't surprise me if this thing gets traction, and if it gets enough traction, it could be some sort of like a minor league or a feeder league for the NFL where players can go to improve and make that step between college and the NFL, and so they don't have to give up football yet. And I think this is a great idea to set this up. I kind of wanted to talk about this league a little bit and how it differs from the NFL and college football, how they differ from both, I should say, and how those leagues can learn from the AAF and maybe implement some rules. And this kind of goes into what Tyler and I have discussed before with some errors with officiating or bad calls or kickoffs or overtime. It's very interesting to take a look at what their rules are and how we can maybe adapt that to the NFL. So let's take a look at the AAF. So one thing that I saw in the AAF that I thought was really interesting is there is no kickoff or extra point kick. There are only field goals. It's the only time the kicker comes out on the field goals and punts, which I think is really interesting. Each team must attempt a 2-point conversion after scoring a touchdown. I think that's a really cool rule, actually. No one cares about kickoffs or extra points typically. It's the 2-point conversions that make things really interesting. And then if you, for no kickoffs, you get the ball at your own 25-yard line. You just get it there. Now, you may ask, what about the situation with the onside kick? The late game, we want the ball back on this onside kick. Where's that element in the AAF? Well, they've got a rule for that. So teams get a 4th and 12 from their own 28. And so they have to get to their own 40-yard line in one play to attempt an onside kick or not an onside kick, but an onside conversion, I think is the name of the rule. So there are stipulations to the 4th and 12 from their own 28 too. They have to be down 17 points or more, or trail with 5 minutes or less in the fourth quarter. So that you can't just have these two highly prolific offensive teams that just keep getting the ball over and over and over again. You have to be down a certain amount, or you have to trail with 5 minutes left to go in the game or less. What I think is really interesting, the surprise onside kick is completely removed out of the game, which I thought was it was a fun part of the game. My team's been burned by it, and I've had teams that I've rooted for, burn other teams for it. So it's kind of something that I think I'll kind of miss. and you kind of miss the prolific, kickoff return touchdowns and stuff like that. But that doesn't happen very often, so I don't think that that's going to be a huge problem going forward. I actually think that it's a net gain. It's a net positive. You might have lost some things and some things that were good about the kickoff and the extra point, but I think you gained more than you lost in this situation. So I really applaud the AAF for making these rule changes. Something else, the Sky Judge, he acts like a replay official, and what he does is he reviews all the calls made by the referees, and if there's a egregious mistake or an obvious mistake, the Sky Judge will actually will call it down to the refs and fix the call, which I think is incredible. I think this is, this is probably someone who's higher up in the officiating. This isn't, or he's probably a director of some sorts. And I think this is a brilliant idea. This removes the need to do replay reviews of calls. They get the time before they get the play clock, basically before the next snap to call it down and say, hey, you missed this call. And I think that is a awesome rule that the AAF has put in, as well as their overtime rule, which I wanted to quickly, forcing a team to go for a 2-point conversion every time they score a touchdown is going to lead to a lot less overtimes in general. I really think that that's a big reason why I like this 2-point conversion rule. But jumping to overtime rules, what I understand their overtime rules to be is that each team gets a possession, like in college, at their opponent's 10-yard line. They each get one possession, and they try to outscore each other before the period ends. Or after each possession, it's whoever has the high score wins. But I think that's a really good solution. I don't know if the 10-yard line is the right area of the field to start from, but I like their creativity in making overtime something a little shorter. And with the new 2-point conversion rule, it allows teams to, you have a lot less ties, I feel like, and forcing multiple overtimes. And it allows the game to go shorter as well, which is really cool. I think that one of the games actually this weekend was 2.5 hours long, which I thought was, that's really short for a football game. And, the typical NFL game is a 3-hour game. And so I was surprised to see that. And I think a lot of that has to do with commercials, that they're not highly commercialized yet. And so you don't have these big, long commercials, these super long commercial breaks. So that definitely could play a part into it. But I also think like a lot of these rules allow for the game to be sped up and allow for the game to, you have less commercial breaks. You have less time wasting situations. Like kickoffs waste so much time. You get a commercial break before a kickoff, a commercial break after a kickoff, and the kickoff lasts about 10 seconds, and the actual play of the kickoff lasts about 10 seconds. And then typically there's, if you're lucky and he actually returns the kick, the play usually lasts like 4 seconds, and then you're at another commercial break, and it does extend the game a lot. And so I think those are some really key rule changes that they made. Something else that the AAF does is they have a replay. Their replays are actually broadcasts, so when you see the officials huddling up and talking, we actually get to hear that as listeners and watchers of the game, and you can hear the reasoning behind the officials. And I actually really like that because I feel like that holds officials accountable, and they're going to want to make the right call because they know they're being listened to. And so I really like the transparency from the AAF. I really think that that's something the NFL should highly look into. I think a lot of these rules, like the Sky Judge and the overtime rule, the NFL really needs to look into adopting. But I really think this transparent replay is probably the biggest thing that they have to do. It allows fans to be in there in the huddle with the refs, and so we can understand their calls better. I think that is an awesome change that they've made, and I really think that that's something that could really should be implemented in other football leagues. I think also something the AAF proved, and then we kind of talked about this in the rule changes, is that football games, they don't need to have kickoffs and extra points to be exciting. You can do the 2-point conversions make those conversion attempts so much more exciting. And I mean, really, who pays attention during the kickoff? I mean, sometimes I do if you got a prolific returner back who could make the chance, have the opportunity to take it back all the way, but that doesn't happen very often. And so I really think that the NFL should look into this as a possibility. I know the AAF is a different league, and the NFL wants to keep, you can't have the NFL and the college football and AAF all playing under the same exact rules. There's a difference there, and you want to keep your own league interesting and different than the other ones. But I think there are some things that are actually good to adopt from other organizations. Also, something that I grew up in Tennessee. I'm an SEC. Grew up in the heart of the SEC for college football. And it's really cool to see Steve Spurrier coaching on the sideline for the AAF. He's a coach for the Orlando team, the Orlando Apollos, and it's good to see a legendary coach like that that's beat Tennessee many, many times. That it's maybe very frustrated towards him, but it's good to see him back on the sideline because he is a legendary coach and he deserves to go in the Hall of Fame. Like he's a great guy and a great addition for the AAF to have. So I really think that the AAF is, it deserves to be on its own. The NFL shouldn't copy the AAF, or the college football shouldn't copy the AAF. But I think there are some lessons that the AAF has taught us that the other leagues can look to and learn from, and potentially look to implement into their own leagues. Because I can almost see the AAF as being like this experimental league where a lot of different things are tried out. They don't really have anything to lose, and it's football. Especially when there's no other football on right now, people are going to watch it. People love football and miss football. So, I was excited to tune in to watch some of these games. So, but yeah, let me know of what you thought of the AAF rule changes and things that they do differently. And let me know what you think, how the NFL and college football should react to this. Should they implement some of these rules? Should they stay away from some of these rules and keep their uniqueness? Let me know what you guys think about the changes made to, or what the AAF is doing in the NFL, or the AAF is doing to the football landscape, I should say. So something I also want to talk about, I want to get into more, after talking a bit about the AAF, I want to talk a little bit about the NFL and about some of the things that have happened in this past week. We have a lot of trades going on in the NFL right now, and team players that are making some big moves. And one of which I want to talk about is Joe Flacco of the Baltimore Ravens he was traded to the Denver Broncos for a mid-round pick. And I really thought that was interesting. We actually kind of talked about Joe Flacco last week, being kind of like this overrated quarterback. He's got a ring, but that's about all he has to his name. And speaking of last week, I actually forgot to mention some of the comments that we got from last week's episode. Just real quick, Eric once again has commented on our podcast, and I just want to read out his awards that he gave for last week. So sorry for not talking about this at the beginning of the episode. It slipped my mind. But Eric says he thinks that the Indianapolis Colts were the most improved team this past year. And I think that was a really good one. That was one that neither Tyler and I even discussed. I think that was a really good choice, especially not only from last season to this past season, but also from the start of the season to the end of the season. That team, I mean, they were dead in the water. I think they would start the season 1-5, and then they were 1-4 or something along those lines. They started off the season really poorly, and then Andrew Luck kind of got he was officially back from his injury. He got 100% healthy, and everything just clicked, and that team was on such a big run to really challenge the Texans for the AFC South title by the end of the season, and then beat the Titans to make it into the playoffs, just to beat the Texans in the wild card. So I really think I'm pretty sure they beat the Texans in the wild card. I can't think. Yeah, it was the Texans that they beat, and not only beat them but stomped them into the ground. So Eric, I really liked the Colts prediction or Colts award. Or give it for the most improved. He also said that the Jags was his team that he was most surprised with how poorly they did. I had to agree on that one. That was and Tyler and I talked about this last week. Is they're just missing a couple pieces here and there, and they are, once they get those pieces, they'll be a really good team. But they're a year removed from going to the AFC title game, and Blake Bortles led him there, and you thought that Blake Bortles could be a serviceable quarterback at the very least, and they're suddenly at the bottom of the AFC South, bottom of the AFC. I mean they've got a top 10 draft pick this year. That's not good as far as how their last season rating went. And finally, he's got two more predictions. His Joe Flacco award, his overrated award, is Dak Prescott. I thought that was a good choice there. I don't think Dak is super overrated. I don't think he's Joe Flacco overrated. I think people kind of know that he's a good, solid quarterback. He'll win you some games, but I don't think he's a Super Bowl caliber quarterback. I think he's got a team around him that could be Super Bowl caliber. Ezekiel Elliott's a Super Bowl caliber running back. I think he's got a Super Bowl caliber offensive line. He's got a couple good receivers, but he himself is not going to single-handedly carry the team to the Super Bowl and win it for them. And so I think that's a solid pick for the Joe Flacco award, but I don't think that I wouldn't say that he's so overrated. I think people know that I think he's almost a trendy pick for an overrated player. Kind of like everyone knows he's kind of overrated. So although he has some good stats, and he has some good hype behind him, and I think that the Cowboys can develop him into a long-term franchise quarterback. I do agree that he's somewhat overrated, for sure. And finally, his Super Bowl prediction for next year is the Patriots versus the Saints. I think that's a solid pick. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen next season, but I think that's a pretty solid pick, and a pretty, fairly realistic for it to happen. That's for sure. So anyway, back to the originally scheduled programming after I forgot to mention that at the beginning. Joe Flacco to the Broncos. I really think this is interesting. The Broncos are getting a lot of flack for this one. I'm not sure if they deserve it, honestly. Tyler and I harped on Joe Flacco last week, and yeah, he gave he's not been the most elite quarterback of all time. He's not even been decent at times. But I really think, definitely for the Ravens, I think this is a good trade. We talked about this last week, actually, that he has one of the worst contracts in the NFL. They've got a good quarterback in Lamar Jackson that can come in and he can do well for them starting off. And they didn't need Joe Flacco anymore. And they got a mid-round pick for him. And I think the Ravens got out pretty good. They got a good deal right there, I feel like. Now, on the Broncos side, John Elway has had a very rough time bringing in quarterbacks who can be the quarterbacks of the future. You look at Brock Osweiler and that stint. He looked okay in the 2015 Super Bowl team. He came in and had some good games with them, but Peyton Manning was their guy. They weren't gonna sit Peyton Manning for Brock Osweiler. And then you look at Paxton Lynch, who was brought in as a potential replacement, and that was, I'm just going to say it, both those guys were absolute failures. Trevor Siemian was a 7th round pick that they picked up, and he started over Paxton Lynch and Brock Osweiler. It's really funny, actually. Osweiler he signed a $70 million contract with the Texans, did horrible for them. Then they traded him to the Browns. The Browns cut him, and the Broncos picked him back up as their 3rd string quarterback. So quite a trip there for Osweiler. But the reason I bring this up is they've had a hard time developing talent over the past few years. Elway has, as the GM there, he's been a legendary quarterback for them, and I don't think that Broncos fans could ever hate Elway. I think that they could disagree with some of the decisions he's made as their GM, but he is a something he has been able to do, I should say, is bring in veteran quarterbacks who can stabilize the situation. He did this with Peyton Manning, and he went to 2 Super Bowls with Peyton, went 1-1 in those Super Bowls. Very successful few years with Peyton Manning at the helm of the Denver Broncos. After that, they brought in Case Keenum as a fix at quarterback for their situation. And a lot of people can look at Keenum and say, hey, you know what did he do last year? They were a 6-10 team. They have a top 10 draft pick. It wasn't a good year. I look at that team, and I really don't know if I can blame Keenum for everything. I think a lot of that is on the coaching staff. I didn't like how the coaching staff used the talent they had. I thought Vance Joseph is a great defensive coordinator, a great defensive mind. I really think the offense suffered for it, though, and I think that they brought in a guy. I think their new coach will see how their new coaching staff will see how they do upcoming. But their previous one, I feel like, really hindered their players, and I can't put that blame fully on Case Keenum for that issue that they had there. Keenum easily put up the best numbers since Peyton Manning as a quarterback there at Denver. I would definitely say he's the best since Peyton for the Broncos. So, but putting that aside, they bring in Joe Flacco. Case Keenum has 1 year left on his deal, and I think they've brought Joe Flacco in to compete with Keenum and make it. I hope they don't try to make it a 2 quarterback system, because I think that's a big no-no in any. Maybe in high school it could work, but college it doesn't really work. Some people can make it work, but not really. It's not a guaranteed flawless system, and so I think that what Elway's thinking here is he brings in Joe Flacco to compete with Case Keenum for the starting job for the Denver Broncos. These 2 guys are going to battle it out. Whoever wins it out is going to be the better quarterback for the team, just plain and simple. A lot of people think that all that Denver team is missing is a quarterback, considering they won a Super Bowl off their amazing defense in 2015. I think there's more to it than that, though. I think there's more to the Broncos situation. Looking at that roster just last offseason was highly depleted. The defense is not the same defense as 2015. They've got a lot of the key players. Von Miller's still there. They've got Chris Harris Jr. They've got a lot of those pieces. They drafted Bradley Chubb last year, who had a great rookie season. That defense is still, I could say that defense could be elite right now, but they're not. It's still not the same team. And I notice how I said they could be elite. They're not currently elite. So I think that's something that the the Broncos need to mend up is their defense. I mean, they're looking at letting Brandon Marshall go, and there's a lot of holes, I feel like, on that defense. But I think that they could still be elite. They have the key players to make it elite. But on the offensive side, excuse me, on the offensive side of the ball, they've got, I mean, the offensive line is meh at best. They don't really have a solid, it's a solid offensive line. It's not gonna, Keenum couldn't stay upright last year. It's just how it was. They've got a couple components. I think Garrett Bowles can be a starting tackle in the NFL. I think that they've got one or two players. They've got a lot of players that they can build around, but that offensive line just really wasn't there this past year. I'm not a giant fan of that offensive line. I think you look at, I think Garrett Bowles can be okay, although he had the most he was the most penalized player for Denver. Granted, he played the most snaps on the offensive line, but he was the most penalized offensive lineman for for them. He allowed the most sacks, but I think also that does play into it, as he did play the most snaps, and it really isn't even close. Connor McGovern played about the same snaps as Garrett Bowles did, but they're the only two at over 1,000 snaps that really came close to that number. Everyone else is under 800, or Billy Turner is at 824 snaps, and everyone else is at 700 or below. So I think Garrett Bowles, once again, he's got the potential to do that, to be a better player and a staple on that offensive line, but really he's about it. Jared Veldheer's decent. Matt Paradis is actually, I think Matt Paradis, if he can stay healthy, can be a good center for them. But other than that, there just really isn't much there on the offensive line. I think that's the problem in Denver, is their offensive line. And I was shocked when they didn't take an offensive lineman. I know that Will Hernandez was a big offensive lineman last year in the draft. I can't remember who else was the other big offensive line name. I think the Colts picked him up, or maybe it was the Giants. I can't remember. No, the Giants picked up Saquon Barkley. So, but I think it was the Colts that picked up the offensive lineman in last year's draft. And I really felt like, yes, they got a great pick in Bradley Chubb, and I think that was a good pickup for them. But I really would have liked to see them pick up the offensive lineman, because that offensive line just isn't. They need more there. I think the quarterback, Trevor Siemian, actually, when they went 8-8 the year after their Super Bowl, they actually did a pretty decent job. They actually were a pretty decent team. They weren't great. Trevor Siemian wasn't setting the world on fire, but I think that showed that they needed more. It's more than just a quarterback problem. It's a team problem, as they've slowly declined since then. Yeah, they had a slightly better year last year than they did the year before, but I really think the offensive line, no one's going to be able to throw when they're on their back, and they really need to look into fixing that offensive line in Denver. I think Joe Flacco can come in and be a serviceable quarterback. He's done enough in this league. He's got experience, and I think that he can. I think he can come in and be the. He can be the future of that team, for sure. Now, something else. I also, with that team, I think really it starts at the offensive line, but the receivers as well are just a very. The receivers are a very. You have Demaryius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders, and Cortland Sutton. That's about your three best receivers at the start of the season. They trade Demaryius Thomas, or they cut him. I don't remember what they do. They kick him off the team, So now you have basically Emmanuel Sanders, Cortland Sutton. Cortland Sutton's your basically deep threat. Not much else going on there. Emmanuel Sanders does everything else. And this is a team that still had playoff chances, with 4 or 5 weeks to go in the season. And Emmanuel Sanders goes down with an injury. And I think that really hurt that team. I think they need depth at the receiver position. I think they need an offensive line. I think they have enough pieces. I mean, their running back committee is really good. Philip Lindsay might be, he might be the best running back in Denver in the past, best running back to play for Denver. Since maybe Travis Henry. I'm trying to think of who the running backs have been for the past 15 years, and they've had the Broncos have had some good teams, but I think that Philip Lindsay is going to be a household name for the Denver Broncos, and he's going to be their lead running back for 7-8 years. And so I think that the Broncos are one of those teams that if they can get the right pieces in the right places, they are going to flip a switch and they're going to be in the playoffs next year. It's just, can they do that? And honestly, I don't know. Is the Joe Flacco trade going to do it? I'm not sure. I think Joe Flacco, like I said, can come in. He can do a serviceable job. He can get them to the playoffs. He's good enough to do that when he has a team around him to do it. So can the coaching staff put his team in a position to help get them back to the playoffs? I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait till next season to find out. Other news in the trading and free agent situation: Kareem Hunt signed with the Browns. Kareem Hunt, for those of you who don't know, was kicked off of the Chiefs last season for when a video tape surfaced of him hitting or kicking his girlfriend for domestic abuse, and they kicked Kareem Hunt off the team for that. There's been mixed reviews in the public since then. I think that everyone deserves a second chance. I've heard the argument that Kareem Hunt, he made a mistake. I don't know about you, but I've never accidentally kicked my wife. That's not thing. Like brutally kick her over and over again. That's not an accident. That's a decision that you make. But at the same time, everyone does deserve a second chance in their life. I don't know the situations around Kareem at the time. I don't know what was going on in his life, if he had substances in his system, if he was drunk or high. I don't know what the situation was, but he still did it. And I think that the Browns probably brought him back a little too soon. We'll see. And this is one of those teams that, talking from just a sport aspect of it, Tyler and I were talking about this last week. I mean, they're just a couple players away from being a great team, and Kareem Hunt definitely could be that piece of the puzzle. So, I personally think that this is a bit too soon. I think that Kareem Hunt does deserve a second chance. I think every person in the world deserves a second chance. But I think this is a bit too soon. But let me know what you guys think. Is it too soon to bring Kareem Hunt back in the NFL, or does he deserve a second chance only months after he was cut for doing this? And then just some final side notes. Antonio Brown announced basically that he's leaving the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's something we've been seeing coming for the past little bit, but we weren't 100% sure. And I think that's a team that's going to have to completely rebuild and change their identity in the next couple of years. Le'Veon Bell's leaving, Antonio Brown's leaving, Ben Roethlisberger, I don't know if he's going to make it another season. He's just getting up there in age. I think that team's going to look completely different here in 2-3 years. And finally, talking about the AAF, actually, Colin Kaepernick was asked to sign with an AAF team, and he said it would take a $20 million salary to play for the AAF. And I think the average salary in the AAF is like $75,000 for each player. Yeah, Colin, I'm sorry, but this does not look good for you. You take sides. All of you listeners, take sides on. Or you're allowed to believe whatever you want about Colin Kaepernick. You can think that he's a great man who's pointing out the flaws of the NFL and the system, and you're welcome to believe that. And you're also welcome to believe that he's a he basically just has started controversy for no reason whatsoever. There's all sorts of different opinions on Colin Kaepernick and his kneeling for the national anthem and all that kind of stuff. I think he looks like a complete fool asking for $20 million from the AAF. It could be his way of saying there's no way I would ever actually play for the AAF. I don't know. But this kind of, to me, this makes him look like a guy who he's got his mind set on one thing and one thing only, and he's not able to get back into football because of it. And so I think that's a bit ridiculous on Kaepernick's side of things, but I think Kaepernick's a solid quarterback. I think he could play in the AAF. I think he'd do well in the AAF. I think he could be a starting quarterback in the NFL if given the chance to do that. I don't know if the NFL is going to give him a chance though, with all the baggage that he comes with to bring to that team. I just don't know if any NFL team is going to do that. But I think that's going to wrap it up for this week's episode. Let me know down below if you agree or disagree with anything that I've been saying, or if you feel like I don't know. Just let me know what you guys think of the AAF and the changes that have been made, because I think that the AAF is onto something for sure. But you guys let me know what you think down in the comments, and until next week, I'll see you guys later.